This will be a video response to Jezuzfreek 777's video titled Kirk Cameron's Hate Speech? And the first thing I want to point my audience to is a video done by BionicDance, which I'll link down below. And BionicDance responded to Jezuzfreek's video in a very impassioned way. And she was noticeably pissed. And to be honest, I do agree that she had every right to be. But first, a bit of context. Kirk Cameron, aka Banana Man's sidekick, aka failed actor, who happens to also be a fundamentalist Christian, came on national television and gave his views on homosexual marriage. And being the funny fucktard that he is, you would expect that he would give all that typical funny fucktard garbage about homosexuality, and you'd be right. Homosexuality is unnatural and gays should not be allowed to marry. I don't want to see them homos out on the street because it's going to destroy the world as we know it. Yeah, blah, blah, blah. We've heard it all. The first thing Jezuzfreek mentions is how the words hate speech are often thrown out in commonplace conversation without any real meaning these days. And this is completely unrelated to my video, Jezuzfreek, but isn't it a bit hypocritical of you to be saying something like that when you throw around the word persecution in the exact same manner? Jezuzfreek then goes on to say, oh, I believe that Kirk Cameron soft-sold his view on Christianity to try and cater to the sensitivity of the LGBT community. My ass, Jezuzfreek, he did not soft sell it. I've watched like 30 seconds of his interview. I had enough after that because I could not sit through all of his drivel, but 30 seconds was more than enough for me to know he did not soft sell it in the least. Jezuzfreek then goes on to say, well, he did tone it down because he knew what he was going to say was offensive. Well, here we reach the main point of the discussion. At least, that's what I think. So, first of all, Kirk Cameron was a bigot in front of national television. That is undeniable at this point. But the question that really has to be asked here is, why did he say these things? And does he have a right to say these things? I think we all know why he said these things. It's because he's a moronic, bigoted, homophobic asshole. But if he knew that these things would essentially offend a lot of people, why did he say them anyways? But at the risk of being called out for something that I didn't say, I'm not saying that something offensive is necessarily something that should not be said. I'm not saying that an unpopular opinion is not something that should be said. I'm saying that a potentially hurtful and hateful, most importantly, hateful opinion should not be said. I think we have to draw a very thin line of what we define as hate speech and what hate speech is compared to an unpopular opinion or something that just might be potentially controversial. So, hate speech is something that's deliberately malicious or even unknowingly malicious towards a group or groups of people, and it has the potential to cause further harm, whether it invokes others to harm that particular group of people or otherwise. So, for example, it's a very unpopular opinion that I hold that I find religion extremely dangerous and irrational. Many people will get offended by that, but can that be considered hate speech? Well, no, because A, I wasn't trying to be intentionally malicious towards religion, and nothing about what I said was intentionally malicious towards religion. And B, even if it was, does it necessarily spark anyone to cause further harm towards those who are religious? No, it doesn't. And if you can find me some examples of where something similar to what I said did spark someone to do some violent act, then I would gladly take what I just said and retract it. But until I am given an example, then I'll stick by what I said. But with something like homosexuality is unnatural, or using a historical example, Jews are unnatural, is that something that can be considered hate speech? Yes, it is. Why? Because it's specifically targeting a group with malicious intent, and it can spark further hatred or further harm towards that particular group, as for the Jews it had in history, and for homosexuals it has in recent history. So you know what I think, Jezuzfreek? I think that it's not a problem that Kirk Cameron knew what he was going to say was offensive. Hell, half the shit I say, half the shit you say, and half the shit BionicDance says in front of a camera might be potentially offensive to a group of people, whether you know it or not. What really matters is Kirk Cameron knew what he was saying was hateful. There's a big difference there, Jezuzfreek. He knew what he was going to say was hateful, and yet he said it anyways. Why? Well, because A, he's a bigoted, fundamentalist idiot, and B, because I suspect, that he thought he had a right to do so under the guise of religious fundamentalism. And I'm sorry, but yeah, religious people do get away with a lot of shit in your country, so what can I say? I think another thing that really has to come into consideration is the truthfulness behind what Kirk Cameron and the like say. Hate speech can only really be considered hate speech if it is unfounded, unprovoked assertions against a particular group or groups. Now, if I'm making a hate speech declaration against those who are religious, um, does it really constitute as hate speech if I said that religion has caused a lot of wars and it continues to cause a lot of trouble in the modern era? No, and one reason for that being is because it's true. Of course, the assertion of Kirk Cameron and bigots like him, which I'm sorry to say happen to include you, are absolutely unfounded in any sort of empirical evidence. And if it is, I would really love to see it, Jezuzfreek. The part of the video I found to be the most aggravating, the most revolting, Jezuzfreek, was how you again play victim and say that Christians are persecuted for their opinions, and oh, we poor persecuted Christians are so often accused with hate speech when all we're doing is saying our opinions, and we should have the right to say our opinions. Jezuzfreek, might I remind you that you live in America, where the majority of the population is Christian? You know what annoys me the most about your video, Jezuzfreek, is that you try and make a martyr of yourself, and the fact that you're not the only one pisses me off even more. I've noticed this with Christians in particular. They seem to have this psychological problem where they like making martyrs of themselves. I think gay marriage should be stopped because it's unnatural and it's gonna screw up the whole foundations of society because it defies the definition of actual marriage. Oh, well, do you have any proof to suggest this? No? Well, then your opinions are bigoted and completely unfounded in any factual information whatsoever, and therefore we should consider it as hate speech, considering how it specifically targets a group, in this case the homosexuals, with malicious intent and can spark further violence. Oh no! Play victim, call the ambulance! Finally, Jezuzfreek, I'd like to say that adding, well, it's only my opinion, or saying something like, well, I didn't mean it in a hurtful way, is not in the least bit comforting. It does not excuse you from saying something that's considered hate speech. So, Jezuzfreek, I don't mean this in any offensive way possible, but if you are going to come on camera, can you at least think before you talk? Thank you very much, and may the truth always be heard.